That bounce isn't hitting me anymore. That feels like it's doing something now. Hello and welcome back. My name's Kyle Jones and I'm a cinematographer and photographer based in London. I use those terms lightly because I'm very okay. I'm excited about this one, and the main reason I'm excited about this one is because of the amount of money I spent on this lens and how much I love it. I originally actually started making this video about a different lens and then ended up buying this lens instead just to see how it would be. I spent less on the second one that I bought and I prefer it more, which kind of just goes to show how little it actually matters how expensive a lens is, because despite this one having some flaws and it being a little bit difficult to use in certain situations, the image that it gives is gorgeous and the versatility that it has is fantastic. So it doesn't really matter if I spent £12 on this lens, but I spent £12 on this lens. 12 British pounds. That is 4 Tesco meal deals before inflation. Now I think it's 3. That's how much you'll spend at Pret if you get 2 coffees and 2 breakfasts. It's how much you'll spend at McDonald's if you are not having a good evening. And more importantly, it's how much I spent on this lens, which is kind of crazy. Now I'm sure you're all wondering, if you haven't read the title of this video, what the lens I'm talking about is. And that is the Olympus 35-105 f3.5 to 4.5. Now I realise I've been getting the name of this lens wrong this whole video, but just forgive. And the sun's gone. Time to move. So, as I'm sure you can tell, it's a different day. I lost motivation. It's sunny again. This lens was delivered to me on the 10th of September, and it is now the 14th of November. I've had this lens for just over 2 months, and in that time, I've shot mainly on it with the XH2S, but that's because the use case of it and the reason I bought it was because I wanted a more versatile lens for the XH2S. Now, I do love taking SAT primes out. For some days, that's great, but I was looking for something that was versatile, that I could stick on the camera and almost just leave it on it. And the lens that I originally bought to do that was the Olympus 35-70, which is an f4. It's very compact. It's not a trombone zoom. It's really lightweight. It's got some nice character, but I got it for very little money, and I already know that I enjoy the Olympus lenses. The OM, the Zuiko lenses are probably one of my favorite sets in the world. I own a set. I love them. There's a reason I have them. There are better lenses out there, but they are just not in my price range, sadly. And I did love using that lens. It's really compact, it's really powerful for what it is, and especially when you're at that close focus, when you're at that 1 meter, it looks really good. But there was just a small part of me that wanted a little bit more. It just wasn't doing as much as I wanted it to. So I went out looking for another lens that was similar, but gave me just a little bit more to offer. While I was looking for other lenses, I also had a look at some of the Pentax zooms and also some of the Zeiss zooms as well. And I ended up landing on a 35-105 trombone zoom by Olympus again. And I could not find anything about it online. Absolutely nothing. I think there's a very small amount on Flickr, but like that was it. That was all I could find. So I went in completely blind, not really knowing what I was getting myself into in terms of optical quality, how it flared, how it looked, what the bokeh was like. It could have been trash. It wasn't. I can tell you that now, that's why I'm here, but could have been really bad. And especially because there's quite a lot of these vintage zooms out there, made by all different brands, all different companies. There's not a lot of information on any of them. And I came out of it having probably the most fun I'd had with a new lens for a very, very long time. Now, disclaimer, I'm not going to be using this lens on anything professional anytime soon. It's not made to be on a set with several people around a camera. That's not why we're here. It's not what this lens is for. I got this lens with the entire intention of just keeping it on this camera body and using it for whenever I was out and about and I wanted to shoot some stuff. And I kind of didn't want to think about like the cost of it. I wanted to make sure that it was cheap, because if it broke or if it wasn't good, then that's fine. You know, I've only spent X amount of money on it. I don't have to worry about it. That was my like logic and thinking going into this. So on that note, let's talk about the lens itself. So the lens itself is a 35 to 105. It's quite a long focus range. 35mm isn't as wide as I'd necessarily like it to go, but it's not a modern zoom. This is an old zoom, and it goes to 105, which is, you know, fairly telephoto. The continuity's off on the glass in the background. Yeah, well, I was hydrating. Now, the minimum focus on this lens on the barrel is 1.5 meters, which when you first look at it isn't great, but what this lens has up its sleeve is that it has a close focusing mode on it, which is essentially just an extension tube built into the lens. Now, this means that you can take your 1.5 meter minimum focus and change it to much closer. Now, it's not really a number for that because it varies depending on the focus range that you're on. When you're out of that mode, you have a fixed 1.5 meter minimum focus, but when you're in macro mode, your minimum focus varies quite a lot. But this extension tube is variable, so this means that you are able to get much closer than 1.5 meters, which immediately eliminated the problem I had with the 35 to 70, which was having the 1 meter close focus, which means that you can shoot portraits, you can shoot close-ups, and you can shoot macro details, and especially on the 35mm side, you can get scary close to your subject and still keep a lot of the sharpness, which is quite nice. Which moves me on to the actual quality of the lens. It's not the sharpest lens. It's not going to be the sharpest lens. We didn't buy this lens thinking it was going to be another Master Prime. We bought this lens because it was £12. It was £12. But saying that, it's not soft. When it's wide open, it's not hazy, dreamy, completely gone detail. It's still got quite a lot of sharpness when it's wide open, and then when it stops to f4, f5.6, you get that sort of razor sharp detail, which you'll get out of most lenses at that range. Now, in regards to other details like the bokeh and the chromatic aberration, I found that the bokeh is very similar to a lot of the other OM lenses that are out there, which is it has quite a hard edge to it, quite a hard bubble, which is something that I really personally enjoy. I find that it's quite textured and it's quite characterful, and in certain situations you get the swirl that you have from the Helios 44-2, which is something that I didn't expect to get from this lens either. And it reminds me very much of the Olympus Primes that I already own and already have and that I love so much, which I think is one of the reasons why I've kept this lens on this body for the last 2 months. I haven't really noticed any chromatic aberration or anything like that. It seems pretty dialed back on it, but it's not a high-speed lens, which means that you're not really going to lightly bump into it unless you're in extreme situations. But even then, I've sort of backlit the sun and shot trying to get as much flare out of this lens as possible, and haven't really noticed any chromatic aberration, so I think it's fairly good on that front. But talking about shooting into the sun, the flares on this lens are wild, are incredible. I know that flares are subjective and some people try and eliminate them as much as possible, but I am the opposite. I really love a flare. I really love an organic flare, a warm flare, especially flares that you get out of zoom lenses where you can see all the optical block as it goes through. That's what I strive for. I love it. It's great. And this lens delivered that more than I ever expected it to. Now, in some situations, people will probably argue that there's too much flare in this lens. Now, I will admit, it does not take a lot for this lens to flare. And when it does flare, it can sort of haze up your image quite a lot in certain situations. Skimming the lens or like side hitting the lens, that's when you get the haze and the sort of like weirdness. Now, I wouldn't say that this is the perfect lens. There are some downsides. For example, the trade-off that you're getting for the 35 to 105 is that the lens is quite long, and then also having that macro tube in there means that you're adding that extra length on it as well. So it's quite a long lens. It's also quite heavy. It's not the lightest lens. Now, when I say that, I don't mean you're going to break your back carrying it. It's lighter than most modern zooms of the same range, but it's not the same as carrying sort of a 28mm prime or a compact zoom or something smaller. Also, with this lens being a trombone zoom, it means that it can be quite hard to get the exact focal length that you want in certain situations, because you're physically having to move the lens forwards and backwards to get the focus length. You can't really sort of like dial in that zoom, sadly. But apart from those two things, I don't really think I've had much of an issue with this lens. I will say that at times I haven't wanted to carry it because of the weight, but saying that, when I have carried it, I've been really happy with the results that I've got. Now, it's not a fast lens at all in both the aperture sense and the operational sense, but I will say that taking that extra bit of time has meant that when I've been shooting some video on the go, I have thought about it a lot more, and I will say that that means that like the stuff that I've been getting, I've been happier with, and so forth and so on. Well then, who is this lens for? I hear you screaming from the rafters. I would say that the main market for this lens is anyone that's either trying to get into 35mm photography and wants a lens that will do everything for them, or someone who's just starting their journey into vintage lenses and wants something with a bit more flexibility, but then also wants something with a bit more character. Because the price point of this lens is so low, it means that the barrier to entry is really low, and that's great. After a quick check on eBay, the average price currently in the UK is anywhere between £25 and £40. The one that I got very lucky on, but I would still say even at £25 to £40, this lens is fantastic. It has a lot of character, the focus range is quite long, with the close focusing mode as well, it has quite a lot of versatility, and all in all, it's fairly sharp and fairly decent. Now don't get me wrong, this lens isn't for everyone. If you're looking for a 24 to 70 replacement on a budget, it's definitely not that. But if you're looking to have fun with something that has a bit more character and a bit more flair, then this definitely is the lens for you. I would almost go as far as saying that if you're looking to start making little short films or making something with your friends and you want something that looks a bit better than a kit lens but you don't want to spend a lot of money on it, then something like this is perfect. All in all, this is probably one of my favorite lenses that I've shot on in a long time, and it's definitely going to stay on my camera for the time being. Probably going to shoot a lot of this kind of content on this lens because of the versatility that it has. Now, if you're looking for something that has a lot of character and a lot of versatility, and the trade-off is that it's a little bit of a pain to use, then this is definitely the lens that you want. Or at least it's worth picking one up to just try it out. Or don't, to be honest. Just do whatever you want. Either way, I hope this hasn't been a complete waste of your time, and you had at least a shred of enjoyment watching this video. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.
Where's the magic gone? Where did it run to? Never thought it'd leave, but I'm left with an emptiness. Won't you tell me where the magic's gone? Well, back when I was young, it was all around.